This was a morning unlike any other. This was Veterans Day morning. A man walked by, older, slower, unnoticed. They saw the weathered navy hat, the measured steps, the skin etched with time, and thought they understood. But they didn't understand. Not the operations buried in classified files. Not the lives rescued that no history books recorded. Not the letters written to comrades that he never stopped honoring. This was more than a routine checkpoint encounter. It was a breathtaking moment in history. Not because he demanded attention, but because true dignity requires no spotlight. The morning sun cast long shadows across the entrance of Fort Westbrook, bathing the security booth in soft golden light. A gentle breeze stirred the flag overhead, but inside the booth, the air felt colder, sharpened by the kind of laughter that carried no kindness. Benjamin Hayes stepped forward, 82 years old. His back remained straight as a flagpole, his hands steady despite his age. His navy fedora, faded at the brim, shadowed deep-set eyes that had witnessed more conflict than most personnel on this base would ever read about. He wore crisp khakis, meticulously polished shoes, and a well-pressed button-down shirt beneath a charcoal wool jacket. He carried no weapons, only a handcrafted cane in one hand and a thin envelope in the other, carefully sealed and visibly important. "Good morning," he said with quiet authority, presenting an ID card that had been tucked into his wallet for decades. His voice was gentle but clear. "I'm here for the memorial." The young lieutenant at the gate, Tyler Reed, 28, regulation haircut, arrogant posture, took the card between two fingers as if handling something distasteful. He glanced at it, then laughed. "This thing expired in 1990, Reed scoffed, flashing it toward the other guards like a joke. "Sir, if you're still a sir, you can't just stroll onto a military installation with something that looks like it came out of a cereal box." Benjamin didn't flinch. He simply waited, gaze steady, as if he heard worse, and almost certainly had. "Seriously," Reed continued, tapping the ID against the metal booth with a smirk. "We get enough walk-ons trying to play war hero." From inside the booth, Sergeant Olivia Reeves leaned out, sipping coffee. "Let me guess, another decorated veteran, with a dramatic story and credentials from the Reagan administration." The guards chuckled. Benjamin didn't speak. He simply extended his hand to retrieve his card, slow but unwavering. His fingers brushed against the edge of the envelope secured under his arm. Still offering no protest, Benjamin accepted the returned card with silent dignity. "Sorry, old-timer," Reed said with a dismissive shrug. "No valid ID, no entry. Try the museum downtown." Benjamin nodded once, then turned and walked back toward the parking area. No anger, no argument, just dignity departing, leaving behind only uncomfortable silence where laughter had been moments before. Private Marco Jimenez leaned against the interior wall of the booth, arms crossed. He hadn't uttered a word during the entire exchange, hadn't laughed, hadn't grinned, just observed, eyes thoughtful beneath his cap as the elderly man slowly retreated. "That was painful," he muttered. Lieutenant Tyler Reed was still smirking, clearly pleased with himself. "Come on, Jimenez. You don't seriously think that guy was legitimate? Did you see that ID? Looked like it survived the Gulf War in a washing machine." Olivia Reeves snorted into her coffee. "He had that whole wise elder persona. Probably tells kids he taught special tactics to Chuck Norris." More laughter rippled through the group. Several other guards outside the booth caught fragments of the jokes and drifted closer. One of them, Corporal David Chen, added, "Honestly, I thought he was here to inspect the plumbing." Who arrives in khakis and a second-hand jacket trying to access a secure facility? Someone else joined in. "Maybe he's researching a novel. How I bluffed my way into a military memorial." And just like that, the mockery escalated. The group fed off each other's energy, laughter growing louder with each exaggerated jab. Someone imitated Benjamin's measured gait, leaning on an imaginary cane, and pretending to be disoriented. Even Reed chuckled, shaking his head with amusement. But Jimenez didn't laugh. He watched as Benjamin reached the edge of the lot, settled onto a bench beneath a solitary oak tree, and removed his hat, placing it respectfully on his lap. Not once did he look back. Something about him, felt wrong to Jimenez. Or perhaps it felt too right, too composed, too dignified to be fraudulent. Jimenez had grown up with stories. His grandfather had served in Korea, rarely discussed it unless pressed, and even then, his voice would transform, lower, more deliberate, filled with shadows from the past. Benjamin Hayes evoked that same quiet weight, the way certain men carry burdens without ever expecting others to acknowledge them. And they had laughed at him. "Doesn't sit right," Jimenez murmured, more to himself now. "You say something," Reed asked, tossing the worn ID into a plastic container labeled "Invalid Credentials." Jimenez didn't answer. Instead, he stepped outside and observed the elderly man beneath the tree. Sunlight illuminated the edge of Benjamin's cane. There, etched subtly into the polished wood, was the Marine Corps emblem. Not decorative, not store-bought. Authentic. Jimenez reached for his phone. His cousin Jordan worked in civilian intelligence out of Arlington. Maybe he could run a discreet background check. Inside the booth, the laughter continued. Outside, beneath the climbing sun, Benjamin Hayes sat in composed silence, unbothered, unbroken. But something was shifting, and Jimenez could sense it instinctively. This situation wasn't concluded, not by a long shot. Sofia Ramirez was stirring a pot of breakfast grits in the mess hall when the gossip filtered in, quiet at first, carried by two guards grabbing early coffee. "You should have seen this guy." Walked up like he owned the entire base. Reed nearly collapsed laughing. She didn't react immediately, just continued stirring. "I was older than my mother, I swear." Jude had a cane and this mysterious envelope, like some kind of retired spy or something. Reed told him to go visit a museum instead. The guy just turned and left, didn't even argue. Now Sophia turned. "What did he look like?" she asked, her voice controlled. One of the guards glanced at her. Elderly black gentleman, maybe early 80s. Navy hat. Wore it like it meant something. Sophia's chest tightened. Navy hat. Yeah, one of those soft felt ones, not a baseball cap. She carefully set the spoon down, wiped her hands on her apron. Was he quiet? The guards exchanged glances, then looked back at her. Didn't say much. Didn't protest, just left. Their expressions showed growing curiosity. Why? Sophia exhaled slowly, her voice becoming distant. "I think I saw him once before. A long time ago, back when this place still reeked of diesel fuel and unspoken sacrifices." The guard stared, suddenly attentive. "It was 1982, she continued. Explosion at the fuel depot. Everyone ran for cover, except one man. Older even then, walked directly into the smoke. Carried 3 injured soldiers out like they weighed nothing. He never spoke a word, just disappeared afterward." "You think that was him?" one guard asked, coffee forgotten. "I never learned his name," she murmured. "But I never forgot that face, or that hat." The room grew uncommonly silent. Meanwhile, back at the checkpoint, Marco Jimenez sat in the break room, phone pressed to his ear. "Jordan, it's me. I need a favor. Can you run a name through personnel archives?" Quietly. He spelled the name carefully. Benjamin Hayes. There was a pause. Probably served during Vietnam. Maybe earlier. Marine Corps. Might have been senior rank. Anything you can find. Jimenez hung up and glanced out the window. Benjamin hadn't departed, still seated on the bench, still composed, as if the world could dissolve around him and he would simply wait for it to rebuild itself. He whispered his father's words to himself. True warriors don't demand respect. They carry it within. At that moment, a young communications specialist overheard fragments of Sophia's account and, driven by curiosity, discreetly captured a photo of Benjamin through the window. She posted it to the base's internal network. "Does anyone recognize this veteran turned away at the gate?" Mess hall staff says he rescued personnel during the 82 incident. The caption wasn't dramatic, but the image, an elderly man sitting tall beneath an oak tree, hat resting in his lap, gaze fixed forward, spoke volumes. Within minutes, the carefully constructed silence began to fracture. The security office at Fort Westbrook rarely experienced true quiet. Between radio communications, foot traffic, and guards rotating shifts, silence was an uncommon visitor. But when the phone rang that morning, sharp, deliberate, and unmistakably official, the room hushed before anyone answered. Private Marco Jimenez was closest. He recognized the caller ID immediately. Pentagon secure line. He stood at attention and answered, voice steady. Private Jimenez speaking. The response was crisp, female, and commanding. "This is Colonel Victoria Harmon. I need to speak with the officer responsible for the main checkpoint immediately. Put me on speaker." Jimenez didn't question the order. He raised a hand to quiet the room and called out, "Lieutenant Reed. Call from Washington. They'd want you on speaker." Reed, who had just returned from regaling the locker room with his heroic veteran confrontation story, sauntered in. He rolled his eyes as he approached the desk. "This is Lieutenant Tyler Reed," he said, a hint of smugness lingering in his tone. "How can I—" "Put me on speaker." The tone sliced through the air like a combat knife. Reed fumbled for the button. Now broadcast throughout the room, the voice filled the space with glacial composure. "Lieutenant Reed, this is Colonel Victoria Harmon with the Special Operations Legacy Division. Effective immediately, you are to treat the man you rejected, Master Sergeant Benjamin Hayes, with complete military honors. You are addressing a man whose service predates your birth, whose record includes operations so classified they remain redacted across 4 military branches." Reed's face drained of color. "Ma'am, I wasn't aware." "No, you weren't," Harmon cut in sharply. "You encountered an elderly man with an outdated ID and transformed it into a source of entertainment. That elderly man commanded Operation Silent Horizon in 1972. He led the extraction of 27 prisoners of war in North Vietnam without losing a single team member. His security clearance under Directive 117B remains valid indefinitely." Silence descended like a lowered flag. Sergeant Reeves stammered, "Wait, that Benjamin Hayes?" "Yes," Harmon confirmed coldly. "And you've humiliated him at your checkpoint." At that precise moment, headlights appeared outside the booth. A black government SUV arrived, carrying 3 high-ranking officers in dress uniform. The lead figure emerged, his presence immediate and commanding, Colonel Nathan Blackwood. "Where is Master Sergeant Hayes?" he inquired, his voice thunder without volume. Reed, mouth dry, gestured toward the bench beneath the tree. Colonel Blackwood muttered once, "Stand down and initiate honors protocol." Without waiting for a response, he marched directly toward the oak tree. Inside the booth, no one moved. Reed's hands trembled slightly. Jimenez glanced around, then said quietly, "What did I tell you?" Outside, Benjamin Hayes rose slowly. Blackwood offered a precise salute. Benjamin returned it with the calm certainty of a man who had performed the gesture countless times. But this occasion carried deeper significance. This time, they finally recognized him. It began with whispers. By the time Colonel Nathan Blackwood escorted Benjamin Hayes back toward the main entrance, those whispers had transformed into directives. Urgent instructions spread across Fort Westbrook like wildfire. Through barracks, offices, training areas, prepare the corridor. Full honors incoming. Master Sergeant Benjamin Hayes. Within 15 minutes, the installation underwent a remarkable transformation. Uniforms were hastily pressed, medals secured, headgear adjusted. An honor guard assembled along the main avenue, stretching from the entrance to the memorial courtyard. At the center of it all, Benjamin walked at a measured pace, unassisted. His cane tucked beneath one arm, his navy hat shielding his eyes, the envelope remained in his hand, untouched, still sealed. Colonel Blackwood walked beside him, 2 additional officers following behind. None spoke. They didn't need to. The sound of boots snapping to attention communicated everything necessary. As they reached the gate, Lieutenant Tyler Reed stood at rigid attention, jaw clenched, eyes forward. Sergeant Olivia Reeves stood beside him, face pale and unreadable. Neither dared speak. Benjamin passed them without acknowledgement, but Colonel Blackwood paused briefly. "For your information," he said, addressing the security team, "that ID card you ridicule contains an embedded security transmitter. It activates annually on Veterans Day. That's how we confirm he's still with us." Reed blinked, visibly stunned. "You track him?" Blackwood's voice hardened. "No, we honor him quietly because Master Sergeant Hayes never sought recognition. Only to ensure we remembered those who never returned home." He turned, and the procession continued forward. Jimenez observed from the booth, heart racing, as the solemn procession advanced down the path lined with saluting service members. Sunlight reflected off dress uniforms. The silence was profound. By the time Benjamin reached the memorial courtyard, the gathering had doubled in size. Officers, recruits, kitchen staff, maintenance personnel. Everyone stood motionless, either at parade rest or rendered salutes. Questions had ceased. Colonel Blackwood gestured toward the memorial wall, polished stone, solemnly engraved. Benjamin stepped forward alone. He withdrew the envelope from his jacket and placed it gently at the base of the monument. Then he knelt, not from physical discomfort, but from profound respect. A hush descended across the courtyard as he bowed his head, one hand resting on the carved names of 18 soldiers. Names no one else had spoken aloud in decades. Names only Benjamin remembered year after year. He didn't speak. He didn't weep. But the silence surrounding him felt sacred. And when he finally rose, turning back toward the assembled crowd, a single voice called out from the ranks, "Master Sergeant on deck." In perfect unison, hundreds of boots snapped together. Hundreds of hands saluted. Not because of regulations, not because of obligation, but because of something far deeper. Respect, long overdue. The memorial courtyard remained perfectly still. Benjamin Hayes stood facing the wall, marble polished smooth, names carved deep into its surface. Names few remembered. Names he could never forget. Colonel Blackwood took a respectful step backward, allowing the veteran to stand alone in his moment of remembrance. Benjamin's hand hovered over the names. His fingers traced them slowly, reverently, like reading messages written in stone. Each name belonged to someone who had followed him through fire, mud, and darkness. Some had addressed him as Sergeant, others had simply called him Hayes. All had called him leader. "I didn't come here seeking applause," Benjamin finally said, his voice quiet but resolute, cutting through the silence like dawn light. "I came to deliver these." He indicated the envelope resting at the monument's base. "I've written letters every year," he continued without turning around. "One for each of them. I told their families what kind of men they were, what they accomplished, what they sacrificed." The crowd behind him remained motionless. "I never mailed them," he added softly. "Didn't believe anyone would care." Colonel Blackwood stepped forward. "They did, Master Sergeant." Benjamin looked up, momentarily startled. Blackwood nodded solemnly. "We've been collecting your letters every Veterans Day. The names and addresses on those envelopes. They weren't just symbols. We delivered every single one." A murmur rippled through the assembly. Benjamin blinked slowly. For the first time all day, his composure faltered. "You delivered them?" "Yes, sir. Every year." Some families have preserved every letter. Some read them during holiday gatherings. Some have framed them. A silence deeper than words settled over the courtyard. Benjamin closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, they glistened, not from weakness, but from a heart finally understood. Lieutenant Reed stood at the rear, rigid in his uniform, his gaze fixed on Benjamin. When the elderly veteran turned, their eyes met. "I'm sorry," Reed said quietly. Benjamin held his gaze, then nodded once. "You saw a man, but you didn't see the weight he carried." Reed swallowed hard. "I see it now." The crowd gradually parted to allow Benjamin through. He didn't require an escort. He walked tall, and as he passed the line of recruits and officers, a realization echoed louder than words. The wall bore names of the fallen, but behind one name still stood a man who remembered. Later that afternoon, Fort Westbrook's commanding officer organized an impromptu gathering in the main auditorium. Over 200 personnel, many recently commissioned, filled the room. Their conversations were subdued, their expressions reflective. Colonel Nathan Blackwood briefly addressed the podium. "Today," he said, "you don't merely encounter history. You stand in its presence." Then he stepped aside. Benjamin Hayes approached slowly, Navy hat in hand, the room falling into respectful silence. He surveyed the young faces before him, some curious, some embarrassed, all attentive. "I'm no hero," he began. "Just a man who honored his commitments." He paused, eyes scanning the back where Lieutenant Reed stood at attention. "You've been taught that recognition comes with rank, decorations, or accolades," Benjamin said, voice firm. "But authentic honor reveals itself when nobody's watching. It's demonstrated in how you treat a stranger, even one who appears not to belong." He stepped back, and the applause that followed wasn't thunderous. It was reverent. Afterward, Reed approached him cautiously. "Master Sergeant, I failed you." Benjamin turned. "No, you failed yourself, but now you face a choice. Transform how you lead, or continue pretending the mirror doesn't reflect truth." Reed straightened his posture. "I'll change, sir." Benjamin nodded, accepting neither apology nor praise, only commitment. That evening, a bronze plaque was installed at the installation's main entrance. "The Benjamin Hayes Gate, for the quiet valor we nearly overlooked." And beneath it, in smaller text, "Honor endures even when credentials expire." Fort Westbrook had turned a significant page, not because of who Benjamin was, but because they finally comprehended what he represented. The following year, as morning mist drifted through the quiet town of Pinecrest Valley, a black government vehicle pulled into a modest gravel driveway. No one knocked. They didn't need to. Benjamin Hayes stood at the front door already, Navy hat in hand, as if he'd been anticipating their arrival, just as he always did on Veterans Day. A young officer emerged and saluted. "Master Sergeant," she said. "Permission to accompany you?" Benjamin offered a subtle smile. Permission granted, and so the tradition continued. Every year, a vehicle arrived. Every year, Benjamin returned to Fort Westbrook, not for ceremonies or speeches, but to kneel at that wall, to whisper the names, to leave another envelope. He never requested recognition, but the base provided it nonetheless. An honor corridor formed with each visit, not from protocol, but from genuine appreciation. When he passed away peacefully in his sleep at age 89, there was no headline, just a sealed envelope on his desk labeled, "For the ones I couldn't bring home." Inside lay one final message. Honor does not diminish with time. It only requires one individual who remembers. Justice may arrive late, but it is never entirely absent. Never cease doing what's right, even when no one is watching. At Fort Westbrook, the Benjamin Hayes Gate still stands, and every new recruit learns his story, not of a man who demanded respect, but of one who embodied it even when forgotten. Because some warriors leave medals behind. Others leave legacies written in silence. And some, like Benjamin, Leave a message that resonates far beyond stone. You don't need rank to stand with dignity. You only need the courage to never surrender it. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world.